Welcome everyone to the Center for Studies in Religion and Societies Thursday public lecture today at the unusual time of 11 a.m. My name is Kathy Chan, and I'm the acting director of the CSRS this year. I would like to open today's lecture by acknowledging and respecting the territories that we are on, the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, and also the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Saanich peoples who have continuing historical relationships with this land on which the University of Victoria sits. It's my great pleasure today to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Rebecca S. Hall. Dr. Hall holds a PhD in Southeast Asian art history from UCLA and is presently the curator of the USC Pacific Asia Museum in Pasadena, California. Her research focuses on the relationship between Buddhist art, practice, and belief in Thailand and Laos and Cambodia. And she is going to speak to us today, as I understand it, about the impermanence and creation and impermanence of monks' cremation structures in Northern Thailand. So welcome, Dr. Hall. I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for coming and thank everybody at UVic for hosting me to talk about one of my favorite topics in the entire world and something I don't get to talk about very often. And in fact, we set this up back before the pandemic. It was going to happen in March 2020. And then I realized like how much time has actually passed since then. I'm not going to talk about that, but that leans into the impermanence theme of the whole talk. But a point that I want you guys to keep in mind while I'm talking is that the area I'm focusing on today in my lecture is Northern Thailand. It's centered around the city of Chiang Mai, which has that giant star on it in the screen here. And this region has a separate history, language, and culture from Bangkok. So what I always just try to remind everybody that Thailand is the contemporary country, but there's all these different cultures and former kingdoms that kind of hold on to their histories as we move in time. And so Northern Thailand was once a separate kingdom called Lan Na. So you'll hear me say Lan Na today, and it's a reference to that Northern Thai kingdom. And in recent years, the term Lan Na and the identity that's associated with it has been embraced wholeheartedly in Chiang Mai. So it's often used as a synonym for Northern Thai culture and a way to separate the Northern Thai from the people of Bangkok. So I think I have that little red mark here. Bangkok, of course, is right here. I mean, of course, to me, but also, of course, because so many people travel to Thailand. But I just also want to say that the funeral traditions and the structures I'm talking about today really are unique to this area. You're not going to find them in Bangkok. You're not going to find them in the islands of Southern Thailand. They really are part of a local Northern Thai culture. So to a visitor from outside of the region, you might be walking through a village or a city and you see a gathering that might first appear to be a typical festival or celebration. Large groups of people, food, clothing, and other trinkets are for sale. The making of merit is happening, and that's all typical festival sites. But a closer look at the activities and the objects reveal many details that point to this as something completely different. Heading towards the commotion, more elements become visible, including a monk's robe, a saffron orange-colored monk's robe that is positioned high in the sky, like a saffron canopy atop 4 very long bamboo poles. Directly underneath sits an imposing tall structure glittering in the sunlight. And I assume that it's always sunny in Thailand. It's not really the case. It is bright and colorful. It appears to be an enormous bird with the head of an elephant. The head and wings move in a steady rhythm, giving the animal a realistic presence. Resting on the bird is a tall tower-like structure rising into the sky. Surrounding the structure are flowers, and nearby is a photo of a monk. In fact, this is the final day of a monk's funeral, and the community is finding a way to honor and celebrate the monk's life before his total departure from this world. As that final day of the funeral begins, a steady stream of laity dressed in black and white make donations to monks and novice monks, then take offerings to the front of the elephant bird structure. And you can see kind of the offerings here. This is what they're offering, right? They're grabbing this after kind of making a donation, and they're walking up to the structure and they're offering it. Monks offer blessings and merit for the crowds of laity for several hours. Then they depart to eat their midday meal. Once the monks have been offered their meal, an abundant amount of food is offered to the lay attendees. Following that meal, everyone gathers together facing the structure, and the formal ceremony of the offering of the monks' robes begins. This takes time, as small groups of laity first take the robes up to a table next to the elephant-headed bird structure. Then a corresponding number of monks walks up to the tables, they say a prayer, and then they collect the robes. The process begins with the lower ranking monks and community members and ends with the highest ranking layperson and monk finalizing the offering. And so these are just photos to kind of illustrate that exactly. You can see the monks' robes all folded up here. This is before they walk it up to the table by the structure. And then you can see the monks having finished the prayer and taking the robes with them. The MC, often a member of the local government, will then say a few words about the monk's life. In a final gesture to the deceased, handmade sandalwood flowers are distributed to everyone in attendance, who then shuffle past the structure and place the flowers nearby. Following this, a frenzy of activity surrounds the structure. And here you can see in people's hands, they're actually carrying these little flowers. And so then you can see the stream of everybody walking up to place them there. So everybody who's in attendance is really an active participant at this point. Following this, you see that it's just all this activity happens as the wreaths of flowers and the photos are moved away. The firewood and sandalwood flowers are placed in the belly of the bird, and all sorts of bamboo contraptions are placed around the structure. The final moment is upon us. And here I have this video that I've never done on Zoom before. I'm hoping it works, but of course it's not working. Even though we did do a practice run of this while, okay, there we go. Oops. And the video is a 10-minute video, and if I'm talking for 40 minutes, I won't show you the whole thing, but just to give you a sense that all of a sudden, video's not a little shaky. I'm always doing too much at once. All right, basically the video captures this cascading number of events. So that includes firecrackers and smoke and all of these different things that end up with this, right? The final moment is this celebration, but this bursting of energy. And it's just really quite amazing to see the amount of kind of pyrotechnics involved. And then all of a sudden the structure catches fire and everybody watches it as it burns from top to bottom and no longer exists. Many objects, both large and small, come together to complete any funeral ceremony. These objects make abstract concepts about existence tangible, and most importantly, ease the worries that the living have about the success of their loved ones in their next life. Objects, particularly those made with care for special ritual occasions, such as a funeral, serve as the physical stand-in or as physical evidence of beliefs. I find cremation structures to be the most fascinating of funeral art objects, especially those structures built for high-ranking or long-serving monks in Northern Thailand. These structures' beauty and short existence echo our own lives and the lessons of impermanence that are so central to Thai Buddhism. An in-depth study of these structures contributes to our understanding of the connection between material culture and Buddhist practice in Northern Thailand. By learning about the production, form, symbolism, and use of these cremation structures, specifically in terms of their relationship to Buddhist concepts, I totally lost my place because I got distracted by Zoom. Specifically in terms of their relationship to Buddhist concepts and practice, we as students and scholars can be pushed further in our approach to materiality and in our own often limited definitions of Buddhist art. My research focus has always been related to objects and visual culture, and I come from an arts background, so I have little difficulty seeing the presence, beauty, and value of objects like these cremation structures, but I'm not convinced everyone is so inclined. We need to extend our understanding of these objects beyond mere appreciation of beauty and the skill and view them as integral agents of the funeral ceremony itself. The belief that objects hold meaning and power is not new. Material culture specialists and art historians have worked to show how objects can serve as mediators between the sacred and the profane, how they play an essential role in the transformation of belief and practice, and help religious practitioners claim control over natural forces and local spirits. By studying these cremation structures and conducting research through observing funerals, interviewing monks and laity, and documenting the production process, this research shows the fusion of belief and practice is a truly remarkable form. And the monks' cremation structures that I'm focusing on are part of a larger practice of constructing and building cremation edifices across Northern Thailand and in surrounding areas. These wood and paper creations come in a variety of sizes, shapes, and colors. Part of understanding the brilliance of the monk structures is to understand them in this wider context. While most deaths are an opportunity to send a loved one into their next birth with flair and provide closure for family members and friends, the deaths of monks demands to be given special attention because of the special status that monks have within Northern Thai Buddhist culture. So here you just see examples. So the two images on the right and the middle are funeral structures for laity, for people who are not ordained in the monkhood. And you can see the relationship between them and this larger monk structure. So I just want to say, like, what I'm trying to say is that you can see this as part of a larger overall visual culture and a kind of ritual culture that we have in Northern Thailand. Monks are the most important members of Thai Buddhist communities, and these men who have served as monks for over 10 years, and some of them 50 years and plus, are seen as particularly special. They are the scholars who looked after the words of the Buddha, and they guide others on his path. They facilitate the making of merit through many aspects of their existence, from the donations they require from laity to survive to the blessings and sermons they offer for those who seek them out on special occasions in their daily lives. Monks are believed to provide those who interact with them a connection to the historical Buddha because of the vows that monks take, because of the robes that monks wear, and through the texts that they read. All of these things can be traced back to the man who gained enlightenment over 2,500 years ago. And importantly, long-serving and charismatic monks possess a great deal of barami. And so that's the term that I have written up there. Barami is the word I'm saying. Barami is a word, or paramita in Pali, is a word that is quite challenging to translate or define because there is no English equivalent. But it basically refers to the spiritual perfection a being can attain through the accumulation of merit over a series of lives. Buddhas, kings, and powerful monks are believed to have more barami than the rest of us, a way to account for their higher status and general essence that sets them apart from the average person. By gaining merit, and merit is something that you get through good action. So you gain merit through generosity, through these ideal actions of charity, and 9 other things that I'm forgetting the words of, but there's 10 perfect actions. And if you can follow those or create them, then you're gaining merit, and monks lead us to do that. And doing that, gaining merit, evolves us towards Buddhahood. Not only do the monks provide a living example of this belief, they facilitate others' ability to become more perfect as they navigate the world. For these reasons, when an important monk dies, there's a sense of loss. But more importantly, there is a need for celebration of a monk's life, celebration that they offered so much to so many, and celebration of their perfections, leading them, if not to enlightenment, then most certainly to a want-free, luxurious life in heaven. And these things are made physical in monks' funerals through words, actions, and ceremonies, and in the towering, colorful structures made especially for this occasion. So it is to these structures I now turn. The very first time I saw a monk's funeral, I was completely awestruck by the cremation structure in all of its beauty and grandeur. This structure is called a prasat no katsadi ling, which is a name that calls attention to the two major components of the structure itself, the large elephant-headed bird and the towering golden palace on its back. I'm going to start with the palace before moving on to a discussion of the bird. So the Thai term for the towering palace is prasat, which translates into English as either palace or castle. Prasat is a form that is used for many different Buddhist objects and architectural forms. And the prasat for a funeral is called a prasat sop, or quite literally a corpse palace. This is obviously a reference to the fact that this structure houses a corpse inside of it. In interviews, people in Northern Thailand refer to prasat sop as being the last house of the deceased, that because it is opulent, it gives the dead person the wealth and prosperity to succeed in his or her next life. The structures are there to provide a beautiful resting place for the deceased and to keep the dead from looking ugly. The prasat sop aids funeral attendees in visualizing the richness of heaven, the rewards for living as a good Buddhist, and the place where they hoped their loved one will reside next. More than that, though, these structures seem to really serve as visions of heaven, a way to envision not only where a loved one is hopefully headed after death, but also one's own destination if you live your life well enough and make ample amounts of merit through good actions that include treating others with kindness, donating support to the monastery, etc. Heaven is important within Thai Buddhist beliefs about life and death. Many people talk about heaven very clearly as the goal for their next life. It is a place filled with riches and beauty. It's represented in art quite regularly. The beings who reside there are called Tewada. They live in golden, jeweled, encrusted palaces, and they don't really have a care in the world. Images of heaven abound in the Buddhist art of the region, so we're looking at some paintings here. But we see heaven in painting, sculpture, and architecture. In these images, the opulence is usually highlighted through depictions of palaces, gold, jewels, and the floating beauty of the Tewada, the figures themselves who reside there. You can see that the prasat is one part of this larger visual world of heaven and its attractive qualities. Let's turn now to the prasat sop for laity, not for monks, but for the regular kind of people who are dedicated to Buddhism and live in Northern Thailand. And this just gives us a better understanding of the basic form, and we can see how the monk structures compare. Looking at the physical form, prasat sop, built for regular people, stand atop a platform, and they're still very tall, but they're nothing like the monks' structures, right? These stand a couple of meters into the sky. They're accessible. They're not quite so towering and large. And just to give you a sense, since there's no human standing here, this is a coffin. So this is a human-sized piece of, coffin. This is a human-sized thing. And so you see it laying here so you can get a sense that the width of this prasat is a human-sized length. And so it's tall. It's like taller than two people. Every prasat sop has this platform base. It has an open-sided body and a roof. The rank or status of the deceased is reflected in the height of the structure, as well as the height of the actual spire, that pokey thing on top. The number of tiers on the roof is always odd, and it's usually 3, 5, 7, or 9. And the number of layers reflecting the social position of the deceased. The higher ranking the individual, the more tiers. And so that's here. This is the tiers I'm talking about at the base of this kind of spire. Culminating in the 9-tiered roof of a powerful monk or a local elite. I was just in Thailand in February, and a woman who was related to the royal family of Lan Na had passed away and they had a structure for her and it had 9 tiers. But usually that's just a monk who would have that many in his roof. But it does reflect social position. So there's always that understanding of how somebody fits into the larger kind of scheme of Thai society. And then you can see, if you're familiar with Thai architecture, that the design of the roof itself echoes the roofs of religious buildings, complete with serpents and birds and finials and things like that. So I'm talking about here, you can see a naga, you can see a home. You can see kind of how it echoes local architecture. These prasat soap are constructed with lightweight wood, like a balsa wood, and paper by funeral art specialists. Family members or village members go to the specialist and place their order once a funeral date has been set. And most prasat soap for laity are built relatively quickly, in only a few days, starting with the wood frame. And so we're just seeing kind of the stages of how this is made. Every inch of the prasat soap is embellished with precise decoration of paint and colored paper. And then the artists frequently incorporate bright colors like blue, pink, and yellow, together with white, silver, and gold into the surface decoration of the prasat. If the deceased was elderly, the colors are limited to a much more refined palette of white and silver or white and gold. Then, when this funeral is for a laity, a non-monk, you can see they are actually put on top of a wheeled platform or a carriage. And then once the funeral ceremony has completed, then the corpse is housed inside of the prasat soap. And at some point, it's then, after a series of chants and prayers, pulled by close family members and friends to the cremation ground. So it goes from the Buddhist temple or the Wat to the cremation ground. So I just love, this is a funeral I attended several years ago. This is not majorly important, busy road in Chiang Mai, and you can see that they're walking along it to get where they needed to go. Like we saw, well, we should have seen, but I had a little technical problem there. In the video for the monk's funeral, the prasat soap for laity is also completely burned with the corpse. There's the colorful display of fireworks, and the structure is set aflame. In addition to its beauty, this is the thing that's most fascinating to me about these structures, is that they're so eye-catching, they're so wonderful, but only exist for a few days. And then their destruction is as important as anything else, right? They only are really realized in form once they are destroyed through fire. So destruction is an important part of their overall function and role in the world. And I'm going to return to that point in a little bit later. So the cremation structure for an influential monk is basically a very large, elaborate prasat soap. Sometimes these towering palaces stand on their own without an animal support, and that's what we're looking at here. The structure you see in the slide was built for an abbot monk at a monastery in Lamphun, which is a city near Chiang Mai. Individual monasteries make decisions about the form that this prasat will take. And so I'm showing you this to demonstrate that not all funerals have the same kind of prasat for high-ranking monks. This structure that we're looking at here certainly conveys the richness expected of a palace, has a very commanding presence. It's incredibly tall. But increasingly now, what I've seen, at least in Northern Thailand, is if the monk was highly revered in his community, his structure will be made in the form of a prasat no khat sariling. The large elephant-headed mythical bird, that is the kind of foundation of this structure, is called a Nokhat Sariling, and it resides in a fabulous forest called the Himapan, a Himapan forest. This forest sits at the base of the mountain that is the axis of the Thai Buddhist world, and that's Mount Meru. Mount Meru is topped with Tavatimsa heaven, or Tawatung in Thai, and this is the heaven of Indra, the heaven where many devotees would like to be reborn. In its role in a monk's funeral, the Nokhat Sariling holds the prasat on its back. In centuries past, this funeral structure was used for members of the Lana royal family. It's only in recent years, recent kind of decades, really a century or so, that we see it being shifted to being used for monks, and that the current practice is focused entirely on monks. The connection to the royal family is important because not only does this put the prasat Nokhat Sariling at the very center of all things Lana, royalty, like high-ranking monks, are elite. They're extraordinary people. They're not like you and I, and they have a great deal of bara mi. and they are certain to be reborn in a better world, a higher heavenly realm when they die, right? So in other words, this started off as something for royalty. Royalty doesn't really exist anymore. Now it's for the monks who hold this very special position. But if you look at the fact that these people have this special kind of power, it's what connects them. One reason the Nokat Sariling is extraordinary is because of its sheer size. And of course, the fact that it's a composite animal. I mean, just look at it in these details. The body is that of a bird, has really large wings, which you can see in the other photographs. It has these large talons that come out from under the body, an enormous tail that curves up above the body. The neck of the animal has scales like a naga, like a serpent. And then the head is this elephant, complete with the trunk, long tusk, large ears, and intense angry eyes. And you can see the eyes, especially in these two photos. They're always angry. They're always bloodshot and fierce. These are not friendly birds. It is simultaneously beautiful and ferocious. The animal is sometimes represented in local stories as a destructive and fierce. Descriptions of the Nokat Sariling state that the body is the size of a house and that it likes to eat elephants, tigers, water buffaloes, and people. It has the ability to fly long distances relatively quickly and will likely not be harassed by other creatures. But there's more to it than that. Nokat Sariling are sometimes depicted as small sculptures on top of the roofs of religious buildings in northern Thailand and the neighboring region. The appearance of these birds on roofs indicates their relationship to the sky, or more specifically as markers of transition from one realm to another. In this case, from the earthly realm to the realm of the heavens. This connection to transition is important as it is the central role of the Nokat Sariling in the cremation structure. With the prasat on its back, the Nokat Sariling is a carrier or transporter of the dead. It is one of the very few animals able to travel between heaven and earth. Thus, the animal provides a direct transit to heaven for someone whose rightful place there is assured, right? So there's not a lot of animals that can do that. This is one of very few that can fly straight to heaven, and nobody's going to mess with it because it's so fierce. That's what I'm trying to say. So as we start to unpack its context and larger cultural meaning, it becomes clear that the elephant-headed bird functions as a confirmation of the fact that a monk is special and has a direct line to heaven. And I've been told exactly as much by monks in interviews. They have said quite clearly to me that the monk's prasat functions not as an aspiration for heaven and a visualization of the deceased's final home. That would be a logical conclusion since that's the goal for common laity. Instead, the prasat Nokat Sariling is a reminder to onlookers of these monks' high status. We already know that monks will be reborn in heaven next. We don't need to visualize it. We know it. It's like an understated fact. So it's more of an inspiration than it is kind of anything else. So are these cremation structures successful in achieving this task? The cremations that feature prasat Nokat Sariling structures are large affairs, attracting a range of people from all over the area to take place in the merit-making activities and view the transition of life that occurs. I can't really estimate how many people attend, but it really is quite an event filled with crowds. When ceremonies are going on, it is packed with people. Everybody's looking on, they're waiting, they're watching, they're documenting, and they're making merit. The funeral that leads up to the cremation is a multi-day affair, usually 5 days in total. The beginning of the funeral also attracts a large crowd, and that's actually what we're looking at in this photo. This is the very first part of the funeral ceremony where they're loading the coffin into another structure that will take it to the prasat Nokat Sariling. So it's just so elaborate. The first day involves the moving of his corpse from its resting place to the structure. The culmination of the funeral is the burning of the structure, an elaborate event that begins with that firework display I talked about and results, as I showed you, in the destruction, total destruction of the edifice. It is a spectacle that speaks more broadly as a reminder that absolutely nothing lasts forever. Any number of these cremation structures might be built over the course of a single year in locations throughout northern Thailand, mostly during the months of February and March. This funeral season, as I refer to it, takes place far from the Buddhist Lent It takes place after the rice has been harvested with less of a threat of rain. It's a time period in which people would have had money to help support the building of structures. During the months that these funerals take place each year, no kat sariling, prasat no kat sariling are built and burned across the region. It's really an incredible sight to behold as the structure glimmers above anyone standing on the ground, coming down, and then the whole process of seeing what's happening. Clearly, the cremation of a prasat no kat sariling is a sizable undertaking for a community, from the cost to the time needed to make sure the celebration is a success. But why go to so much trouble? As I've already established, monks are special. They need to be both celebrated and they need to provide an example to others. Of course, the crowds and attention that manifest as a result of a major funeral are also a nice benefit for a monastery and its surrounding area. Once the structure is built, on the days leading up to the cremation, all variety of local people walk up to see it. They take selfies with it. They sit in awe of its presence. They make merit. They post about seeing it on social media. It can bring a community together while simultaneously giving them the opportunity to be thankful for the monk whose remains it houses. And often, again, people will talk about that monk at the funeral ceremonies. They will talk about what he brought to the community, not just on the loudspeaker in the kind of formal setting, but also to each other, their appreciation for him. Right. And it also gives people the chance to make merit. And I keep talking about merit, but it really is this driving force of Thai Buddhism. And the opportunity to make merit is always a welcome activity. Although it is created for the purpose of being burned, the artistic integrity of the prasat no kat sariling. So here's one at night. You can just see, right? You can understand if there's something like this in your community, you'd probably go out to take a picture with it too. You'd be really proud that you had something like this for others to see. Although it's created for the purpose of being burned, the artistic integrity of the prasat no kat sariling reflects its role in the funeral ceremony. The specialists who make these structures say they take at least a month to build, if not longer. And the workshops I have visited only take orders on between 6 and 10 of these structures per year. And again, it's all happening within a short period of time because of the amount of detailed work involved with creating them. The building of a prasat no kat sariling involves building a strong, solid, sturdy, but ultimately lightweight wooden armature. And you can see here, it includes cutting paper shapes, piecing them together. The architectural details that give the roof its elaborate appearance come from precisely cut and painted foam pieces. And they have individuals who do each of these different steps. So it's really also an employment kind of site in villages as well when they are making these structures. The process of creating a single prasat no kat sariling even includes the ongoing maintenance, constant stirring of a hot flour mixture that's used as paper mache for achieving the head, body, and wings of the bird. Each of these workshops is very impressive in terms of its organization, what's achieved, and how many people are involved as the subsidiary workers, with usually just a single expert kind of guiding them. Once the structure is built in pieces, it's brought to the cremation ground several days before the start of the funeral. It's carefully pieced together and finished on site. And the whole thing is entirely, this is not always true, but generally speaking, in our current moment, the entire thing is immobile, with the exception of the head and the wings. And what's really fun about the head and the wings is in the past, people used to climb into the body of the bird and pull on pulleys to get them to move. And it's just, now they have a motor to do it, but it's really just to give onlookers a sense that the bird is real. It's just to create more of an illusion that this is a real thing. Right. If in the past, it would have been pulled to the site like that picture I showed you of the people on that street in Chiang Mai and then put there after it was built. But that's less common. I've seen a few examples of it now, but it's just usually they're so big, there's no way they can pull them through the streets. Great pride is taken in the building and incorporation of these mythical birds, as they are not only signifying a monk's death, but they are highlighted as a local tradition of which the Northern Thai people are quite proud. And the bigger and more ostentatious the structure, the more attention it might bring to a community and to that deceased monk and his temple. I was told by an abbot monk who oversees the creation of some of these, really some of the most fabulous prasat no Khat Sariling in Chiang Mai, that the current trend is for these structures to be built larger and larger, and that whether he agrees with the specifications that are given to him when a structure is ordered, his obligation is to create what is asked of him. In Northern Thailand, like I said, increasing numbers of these are built and burned. And I think one that really had an outsized influence on this trend of really big ones and more people knowing about it happened in 2010. In January of 2010, when the cremation of what's called the Archbishop of Northern Thailand occurred, the event was held in the middle of Chiang Mai at a site called Wat Jedi Luang. And you guys can see this, the people in the picture on the left, you can see people. So you get a sense of just how big this thing is. It's enormous. It towered over nearby buildings and people. And of course, it was that big to indicate the size, to indicate the monk's really unique high status. Enormous factors impact the incorporation of the prasat no Khat Sariling into funeral ceremonies. As the economy has improved in Thailand and more people have gained disposable incomes, monasteries have become very wealthy. The influx of money has also helped increase the number of prasat no Khat Sariling structures in monks' funerals across Northern Thailand. And I think social media and the internet play a factor too, as funeral attendees post photos and document the prasat no Khat Sariling for all to see. The tradition will continue to flourish and even gain attention if the economic and cultural factors continue. And this is really interesting because I've talked about this, but now it's interesting to see with everything that's happened post-COVID. The monasteries still seem extremely wealthy to me, but just to see if any kind of economic impacts are going to change this. It just felt like this kind of snowball effect of that. They're getting wealthier and wealthier, and the structures are getting bigger and bigger. No matter what, the tradition will continue to flourish and even gain attention as this continues. Well, I don't have to go on about that. I have some thoughts about that as well. But if interest wanes or monetary tides turn, fewer grand cremation structures will probably result. So it's just a matter of time to see what happens. Let's now return to the indisputable fact that these amazing structures are made for the specific end result of total decimation in the cremation fire, together, of course, with the corpse of the monk, right? I really highlighted the structure. Obviously, I mean, not obviously, but that comes from my art history background, my love of objects, but I haven't really kind of emphasized enough that the monk's body is in the structure when it burns. And so everything gets burned together. This destruction is a reminder of the transient nature of life. It is impermanence, anicca, a core tenet of Buddhism and the first of the three marks of existence, with dukkha, suffering, and anatta, the non-self, being the other two. But impermanence, I'm a little biased. I'm happen to be quite taken with that aspect of Buddhism, but how much you hear it referenced at the funerals as well. Right? The most potent message in a Buddhist funeral is impermanence. The word is repeated and speculated about in the chants of the monks during the funeral. It's echoed in the ephemera of the structure and other objects used during the ceremony. The fact that nothing stays the same and everything comes to an end might be something we all abstractly recognize. What better way to enhance and give weight to that fact than through the almost shocking burning of such an impressive and stunning structure? In other words, the cremation of a monk and the burning of the structure really emphasize impermanence and drive this point home in a way that words cannot. And in the smoldering embers on the ground, the prasat no Khat Sariling has fulfilled its duty. To conclude, we can say that in Northern Thailand, a cremation structure has a majestic presence during the funeral for a high-ranking monk, but the structure has not completed its purpose until it is destroyed. In addition to the making of merit that is associated with these funerals, and they really are, I can't emphasize that, they are really big merit generators. The cremation clearly functions as a way of honoring the monk, of presenting him as a powerful embodiment of Buddhist perfection, and of course, sending him into his next birth. This point is clearly made not only in the symbolism of the prasat no Khat Sariling, but in the culmination of the cremation ceremony. The burning of this impressive and stunning structure is a reminder of the transient nature of life. The structure itself and the overall event take on great meaning for everyone involved, for monks, for laity, for the living, and for the dead. Not only does it remind viewers that everything must end, that the desired result, that of the ends of this life on earth is a rebirth in a heavenly realm. And that I'm saying because that's what's told to me very often when I'm there. Thus, we can conclude that the nature of the prasat no katsariling structure is not only one of beauty, but is very specifically didactic as well. This towering and glittering prasat no katsariling reminds us of the beauty of life and its inevitable end. It is through its presence, creation, and destruction that these structures help to add a reassuring message to the living. And without them, perhaps this message would be just a little bit less concrete. And that's all I have for you guys. I tried to make it a 40-minute presentation. My video situation was a little disappointing because when you can watch all of the fireworks and see it actually happen, it really does drive everything home.
Thank you. Oh, there we are. There I am. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. That was fascinating and visually stunning presentation and right on time. So well done. We have 15 minutes or so for some questions and some comments. And I know we've got some people on the call who know a lot more than I do. So, we've already got a hand up. So I will get to Holly and then Martin Adam after Holly. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Rebecca. It was fascinating. I'm sort of thinking of the practical side. If the funerals only take place for 1 month, during 1 month of a whole year, what happens for those people who die during the year? What happens to their bodies?
They are preserved. And I feel like I have to say that, but the corpses are kept because, especially for the monks continue to resonate with this merit, with this barami, even in death, that the corpse still has this aura to it. It's not a good word. Aura is a terrible word, but I used it anyway, so it's too late. But anyway, so what they do is they actually keep them in the monasteries. And I have seen two different kinds of treatment of that. I've actually been in buildings where they actually have the corpse right there, right in front of the Buddha image. And they're always connected by white cotton string for everybody, because in this situation, again, it's actually a really amazing thing to have access to a monk. Or they're kept in a coffin and then still kind of visible as part of the monastery. So in a nutshell, they're just preserved and kept in. And so in the past, it would have been actually with, I believe, honey. I've read about it in Thai. And I hope I understand it, but they did always do this, and they have kept them for several years in kind of the process of gaining the money necessary for the funerals, but then also continuing to reap the benefits of being in the presence of this great monk.
Is that a kind of embalming process with honey?
Yes, it is. And I don't know. I'm only remembering the honey part. I think sawdust is involved. I think that they bring, I don't think it's just, I don't read into it in great detail, but I think that there's sawdust and honey that used to be involved in an embalming.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then they actually would paint gold leaf on the surface of I forgot that part. So they actually put gold leaf on the surface of the monk's skin as well. So it really is this reverent treatment of the corpse itself.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering that as well. We have Martin.
Hi, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'm always in awe of this kind of social analysis of Buddhism because it's kind of outside of my own area. But I wanted to ask about some of the, I guess the principles involved in determining the social or the ranking of the monks, because I'm aware that there are a number of different ways that monks are ranked. Some are internal to the sangha, to the monks themselves, and in terms of time of ordination, giving seniority. But you also mentioned social influence, and that those two aren't necessarily the same, I would think. You know, there's charisma and well-known, and you know, those kind of factors that come into it, and how highly revered they are as well. So you've got the idea of, you know, seniority going with the time of ordination, and then you've got the idea of social, you know, influence. Those two, and then finally, there's another hierarchy, you know, within Buddhist doctrine pertaining to the spiritual status of the actual, well, you can say this, the attainment level of the monk, or it doesn't even have to be a monk, but whether a person is a stream enterer or close to becoming an arahant, or just an ordinary person. So I'm just wondering, like, about those factors. And then who determines, you know, like all of, you know, how highly ranked a monk is, so that you get the different tiers on the roof and so on. So is that something done in consultation with the monks? Do they sort of tell the builders of the pyre, you know, that, you know, this is how many tiers the roof should have and so on? So I realize that's rather a lot on one question, but those are all things that were percolating in my mind, and they're all sort of constellated on that question of hierarchy.
No, I love it. I feel like you answered your own question though a little bit there, which is
good.
great for me, Martin. But anyway, there's also a political dimension to it, right? Because of how important it is for the Thai state to show their investment and be involved with Buddhism. So Buddhism is Buddhism at the monasteries is never divorced from the government in some way. And so the government, like for instance, the one I showed you of the guy that we call the archbishop, because that's the only English word that I can think of. They're determined by the king and kind of the king's council and the monks who advise the king. So there's a lot to it. There's the political dimension. There's the amount of time served and the status that comes from that, because I'm at all of these funerals, that is an important part. They'll say how old the monk was and then how many years he had been a monk. So through the pansa, which is the rains retreat, like the Buddhist, they count Buddhist years of a monk by how many times he's been through one of these kind of, gosh, I don't know why my brain's not doing it, but the high holy part of the Buddhist calendar. And so that's always put forth, like this guy was 90 years old and he's been a monk for 76 years. But there's also kind of the monks who live outside of all of this. And some of the most powerful monks in Northern Thailand, the quote unquote charismatic monks, the Kruba, are actually ones who kind of live in the forest monasteries outside of the system. Yep. So there's a lot to it. There's the status that's given, from the town and the monks that they really feel have invested themselves in the villages where they are living. And I think that that's important, because I think as I think is really established, these funerals really are for the villagers, for the laity, as much as they're for anyone else. But yeah, so I don't know. It's so hard to answer that question because there's so many different things going on. Like the monks who really can do all of these things, there are the magical monks who do all of these things, and they have their own kind of status. And so, but for a funeral like this, it really comes from, I think, the political status of the monk and then how long he's been in the monkhood.
Right.
I hope I answered that. There was a lot to it, and it really is one of those nuanced kind of answers.
Good. No, it's a good answer. And you know, obviously a lot to think about in that area. Yeah.
Okay. We've got Melia and then Victor.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for an awesome talk. So I had a question about the formal origins of the Nopat Sadi Ling. Is it Indic in origin, or is it in any scriptures? What are the origins that you've been able to determine?
Well, there's the kind of, it is in the larger kind of Hindu Buddhist world because it's in Himavanta. I always use the Thai words, but Himapan, because it is one of the mythical animals that's in the forest at the base of Mount Meru. And so I don't know of any specific texts that are like really at the core of Buddhist or Hindu religious whatever, not being flippant, I just can't remember the word I'm looking for. But anyway, I don't really, when I look for things and I find these animals in text, it's actually in kind of the local text. There's like Jatakas, like previous life stories of the Buddha that aren't the core Jatakas. They're ones that are actually written locally, that you'll find the Nokat Sadiling. And then there's also like in Northern Thailand, the Mon people lived there before the Thai. And so the Nokat Sadiling is associated with them. So I think what they've taken is like a local form and then folded into the larger Hindu Buddhist cosmology. So I haven't really seen a lot of this when I look at South Asian material. I think there is a connection, and I think you can always find composite animals, but I really think of this as Southeast Asian thing. And I really want to dig more into the connection to the Mon people, which is the people who were there, again, like I said, earlier kingdoms than the Thais.
Thank you. Victor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Rebecca, thank you very much for that interesting presentation. I have two questions. I don't think we can discuss both, but let me at least put them on the table. The first is, could you tell us what happens actually in the funeral ceremony itself? The reason why I asked this question is because I'm familiar with the Rinzai Zen funeral, where the events that take place in the funeral itself tell a story. It's the story of enlightenment. The person who is deceased is treated as if he were a new ordinand. And so the ordination sutra is chanted in the funeral. And as part of the ordination, the newly ordained monk shaves his head. And as part of the funeral ceremony, the shaving of the head sutra is chanted. The final goal of ordination for a monk is the attainment of enlightenment. And so the priest who is in charge of the ceremony, the funeral ceremony, lights a stick of incense and waves it in a great circle and gives a great shout, "Ha!" to indicate the attainment of awakening. Is there a story like that structures the funeral ceremony in the Thai tradition?
I love that. And it varies from funeral to funeral, actually. So I would say as a whole, there isn't something that ties it together and is like everybody has that narrative. Instead, the one thing that ties together even throughout Buddhist Southeast Asia is the reading of the Abhidhamma text. So it's not a narrative text at all, but it's more a text talking about barami and merit and kind of this text that's very much associated with death. I know of local funerals and really certain traditions that we see in Thailand and the surrounding areas that have narratives, but nothing like what you're describing at all. They will have monks come, because it's a multi-day ceremony, they'll have monks come and tell stories, and that is part of the process, but they're more stories of the Jatakas of the Buddha's past lives, or stories kind of related to the gaining of merit and the accumulation of barami. And so it's very interesting. We do get ordinations associated with funerals when it's not a monk in Southeast Asia, but those are like the family members who ordain so that they can give more merit to the deceased to ensure a better their next birth would be better. So it's different. It's totally different, I would say, in a nutshell. But what has always been emphasized to me is that it changes from site to site, and then it's really kind of this flexibility of what the monks who have kind of consulted about what they want to do at the funeral, it very much changes. So I'd say it mostly focuses on merit. The stories that are told are all about merit. And because as you've noticed, I've shied away from saying very much about enlightenment, which is unique. We often expect Buddhism to be focused on that. But even the stories are about heaven and hell. And the Thai focus really is on this kind of how to escape the rebirths in hell and how to get out of them and things like that.
Thank you. Do you want to follow up with your second question? We have a few more minutes.
Yes, please. Is there a modern Buddhist movement in Thailand? Are there newly organized Buddhist groups that critique the exploitation that's part of traditional Buddhism?
Yes. I am not an expert in those. There are a lot. There's one that I cannot remember the name of that actually is almost like Scientology and its connection to aliens and the way that it creates this architecture that's like spaceships and like this really forward-looking futuristic kind of Buddhism. And there are the monks who kind of withdraw from all of this wealth and ornateness and kind of the way that everything's been materialized. And those are the ones, it's really the rise of the forest monasteries and the monks who kind of live outside of the system. But what the biggest concern is actually the opposite is this corruption of everything that's happening. More than anything, I hear about the monks who are doing all the wrong things and having jet planes that they own. And so there's definitely a fight against that. But you see this faction between like, how do we get back to what Buddhism's supposed to be with this kind of very contemporary exploitation of wealth and greed that shouldn't be a part of Buddhism at all. So there's a lot of different things happening. There's the rise of the charismatic monks, who there's a single monk then who has all of these followers who will travel for great distances to be in the presence of these monks and hear them give a sermon. And so, yeah, Buddhism's thriving in lots of forms, and there's a lot of discussions about what exactly is happening and how to stay true to the Dharma or not. So it's multifaceted in Thailand.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We're just about out of time, but maybe I'll just ask you one last quick question that comes from Scott. I think it's a good question. He's curious about what they do with the ashes and the remnants. Are there any kind of permanent markers or things that happen with these, with the ashes, etc.?
And I was actually thinking about that when I was giving my talk. I actually have a photograph. What happens is somebody tends that fire. Well, multiple people, multiple monks or novice monks will tend to that fire the whole night because it literally burns down to nothing and it's just coals. And then in the morning, like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., people will go, the monks will go and pull the bones out of the cremation fire. So the remnants of the bones will be pulled out. They will be cleansed and blessed and then taken back to the monastery. And again, really the prevalence of local traditions and just how it changes from like one valley to the next, I cannot emphasize enough in this part of Southeast Asia. But so a lot of times they will be preserved in a small stupa, but they are kept at the monastery for purposes of blessing and kind of and merit making as well. So yes, that is a great question, and they do continue to be held. And there's a whole ritual around what you do with those bones once they're removed.
So fascinating. Well, we're just about out of time, but let me thank Rebecca for such an interesting talk and really accessible, I think, presentation and view into a particular Buddhist tradition. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm really glad we could make it work. We'll have to have you back and in person sometime when you make it north of the border.
Oh, I would love that.
Next week, actually, we're continuing on with, and you're welcome to join us, Rebecca, if you're around online, because we're continuing with this theme of funerals and funeral vessels and processes of I don't know, transition, I guess, after life is over. And we have Holly Ratcliffe, our artist in residence this year, talking about the tradition of pentimenti and her work making ceramic funeral vessels and the way they can function as biographies of spiritual journeys. So I think that follows really nicely from what we heard about today, and we will look forward to seeing many of you there. So thanks very much for being with us, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks again, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
All right.